Hey, welcome. Welcome to our show here tonight. I always have to make sure that I give it a few seconds to actually get off and going because sometimes it seems like I start before it does. So, still trying to get a full grasp on our technology, but welcome to We'll Sing and We'll Shout. We are actually up. Is this episode 63, I think, which is wow, pretty amazing. So, we are going to, this is Thursday. I'm your host, Steve Hansen. This is Thursday. We're going to do a throwback Thursday here tonight and talk about, uh, sure, I've got some echo going on here.
Oh,
What's going
geez.
on today?
I
Yeah,
just went off of I just kind of joined up with you.
yeah.
Do I need to
Oh,
turn that off?
no, now it seems like it went away. So whatever happened, it's okay now.
Okay.
So, so I wanted to jump in here tonight and talk about some things that have really shaped my life a lot from way back. You know, there's that echo again. I don't
Hmm.
know. I don't know why that happens.
Well, let me
Yeah.
turn my microphone off and see if it gets better.
Okay. So yeah, that went away. I guess I would just say whenever you want to say something, just come off a mute. Otherwise, we'll just leave you on mute. Okay.
Yep,
So
sounds good.
all right. So I wanted to share some stories, some things that have really shaped my life a lot. And one of these was the priority that I determined that I was going to put on my marriage and my family and children, and what all shaped all that, and where that came from, and having made those choices, how that developed for me over the years, and how I see that now here, what is now 42 years later, and also the person that was greatly involved in that whole experience for me. Not that there was just one person, because it wasn't, but there was one person who maybe shaped all this for me, perhaps more than anyone else outside of my own family influences. So I want to talk about that person. I want to talk about that experience. I want to talk about how that all developed for me, and where I sit here these 42 years later now, and how I see all that, and how I see that applying just as much in today's world as it did 42 years ago. So, but before I jump into that, I just want to give you a little update on my jet lag. So I call it jet lag, but it's really just, I guess it's my circadian rhythm. I'm trying to get used to being back home after being in Thailand. Today is Thursday, so I've been home 5 days. I only, so let's see, yesterday I slept from 4 to 6 p.m. in the afternoon, got up and stayed up until 11 o'clock last night. And I could tell around 9:30 or 10 that I was starting to feel pretty tired, but we've got a couple grandsons around here, the two older ones this week, and Heidi's keeping track of them. And just with everything, getting them to bed and getting the dishes all done and everything else, it was 11 o'clock before we finally got to bed. And I thought, this is going to be really good. I'm feeling really tired. I'm probably going to sleep. In fact, I'm not even going to set my alarm clock. A lot of times I get up earlier than Heidi does. I'm not even going to set my alarm clock. I'll probably just end up waking up when she does at 6:30 to get Kenny off to school. And if I wake up earlier than that, that's going to be okay. But that'll be my fallback. Well, I ended up waking up at 2:30 in the morning. Couldn't get back to sleep, and came down to my office and started working at 3 a.m. and stayed awake until about 8 a.m. and then finally went back to sleep from 8 to 10 a.m. So my sleeping is just all over the place, but I've been awake all day now since 10 a.m. And I think that I'm going to go to sleep tonight and be able to sleep. That's my great hope and expectation, so that I can get back to some normal rhythm. But I'm doing okay. But wow, this has really been difficult to get back home from this experience in Thailand and to feel normal, because when you don't get some sleep at night, it really messes with how you feel during the day. Um, so it was during that winter of 1984, and I have talked about these stories before. But if you don't follow all my lives and all my stories, then you don't always know how all these things fit together. But I'm not going to try and kind of go through all of that again. But I will just say that it was mid-February, around February 20th of 1984, that I finished reading the Book of Mormon for the first time, and that was a really huge eye opener for me. It was a very spiritually moving experience to read the Book of Mormon for the first time, and which is interesting that this Footloose picture hangs on the wall, because it was literally 6 days after I read the Book of Mormon, finished reading the Book of Mormon for the first time, that I went and saw that movie, and that movie was just being released around that same time frame. So, uh, and why that movie poster hangs on the wall there, maybe we'll talk about that another day. But one of the other things that was happening is I was having this spiritual awakening, spiritual enlightenment during that winter of 1984. Is my dad? It was my dad that actually gave me my first set of scriptures, and the Book of Mormon portion of that is a lot more worn than the Bible portion. But he also, in addition to that, he also gave me some tapes by this guy named George Durant, and they were cassette tapes. They were tapes on cassette. They were talks on cassette. Dad was a bishop there in Sandusky Ward for a number of years, and he would go out to Salt Lake for a general conference. And while he was out there, he would pick up church books, books by various church leaders, and he would bring those home, and they would sit there on the shelf. And I mean, of course, he would read them too, but they would sit there on the shelf. But he would also bring some other things home, and these talks by George Durant were things that had come home with him from one of those trips out to Salt Lake. And these talks were by George, Cheryl, were talks that were given at Ricks College and BYU. In fact, I think they all were. They were all either Ricks College or BYU. So they're about 45 minutes in length, and I'll just read the topics here that he talked about. The first one was a story that must be told, and these are just the headlines of the talk. Obviously, the talk for 45 minutes has a lot in it. But the first one was a story that must be told. The best one was the best. I'm sorry. The second one was the best meeting of all. The next cassette tape was I Am Special, and then Seek Correct Answers. And then another one was entitled You Can't Score Until You've Served. And then on the back side of that is Get Ready, Get Married, Grow. And then one of my favorite ones is this one entitled Number One Christian. And then finally, we have this one called The Line of Scrimmage is the Home. So these were these different talks, and George was the youngest of 9 children in a family that grew up here in American Fork, Utah, which is just up the street from Provo here. And in fact, in my work as a general contractor doing renovation and remodeling over the last decade, I have had a number of customers up there in the American Fork area. So I know that area fairly well. But George grew up there somewhere, and then he served a mission in England, and then he also ended up serving 2 years in the army in Korea. And then he got married and had a family of 8 children. He and his wife had 8 children of their own. So George would have a lot of stories to share about his years growing up, and also about his mission and about his experiences in Korea, but also in raising his own family. And he had, like I said, 8 children. He would talk about his, I think his oldest son's name was Matt. He would also talk about his son, Devin, and he would talk about his youngest son, Mark. I'm pretty sure he also had a daughter whose name was Catherine. And then obviously there were 4 other children who I don't remember their names. But he would talk about all these kids. And here's my Cheryl. Here's my Cheryl. Here's my sister jumping back in here. Let's see if is it okay now?
Is it any better?
I don't.
Like my talking?
Yeah, you're talking. I don't hear the echo now, so I think we're okay.
Well, and
I'm not
usually
sure.
I can make comments to you, like on
Yeah.
Facebook Live or whatever, but
Oh,
it's
okay.
not showing me where I can make the comment here, so I'm kind of confused. And like last night, I could see how many people were watching, and tonight I can't. I don't know what's going
Right.
on, but
Right. I don't know that I know either. So,
well, I'll
but
just make my comments like this, just
yeah, this is
through the
perfect.
microphone.
So, did you ever catch any of George Durant's talks when you were out here at BYU or
Yeah,
Rick's?
yeah, and
You
Paul
did.
Dunn was really big at the time too.
Oh, you did. So he was that up at Rick's, or where did you catch him?
Yeah, Rick's, yeah,
Wow.
yeah.
What do you remember about that experience?
Well, I just remember he was really like all the kids liked him. Like I remember that particular, um, what do we call those things on Tuesday where the whole campus came?
Yeah, devotional.
Devotional. That
Yeah,
particular devotional was extra packed because all the kids liked him.
yeah,
And
yeah. He was.
then we had another speaker too, but I can't remember his name right off the top of my head. But I actually went and bought his talk that he did at the devotional because I loved it so much and listened to it over and over again. So we had some really
Okay.
good speakers up at Rick's.
Yeah, yeah. So George had a lot of good things to say, and he shared a lot of topics. Obviously gospel related topics, but he talked a lot about marriage and family. That was, of all the things that George would talk about, that was a big one. So and I found that even though that we came from this broken home and broken family, sure, I found a lot that I could relate to in his talks, because he would talk about, cows in the barnyard and
Right.
basketball in the barn, and he would talk about a mother who loved him, and he would talk about brothers and sisters and playing basketball, and there was just a lot that I could relate to, but I could also relate to his. I could also relate to the idea of going on a mission and coming home and getting married and having a family, and all these things that he was teaching and encouraging were all things that it's like, those are things that I aspire to do, that I want to do with my life.
Right.
And I learned a lot from his words and his story and his testimony that really shaped a lot of my thinking and feeling and testimony. And so, while reading the Book of Mormon was a very powerful spiritual experience, it was really maybe through George's stories and George's testimony that that filled in so many gaps for me.
Right.
And we had an amazing mother, and
We
who
actually
was,
had a really strong family for a long time. I mean, when mom was home and well, everything, we did the scripture study. We went to Jiminy Christmas. We were up at that Sandusky Ward Wednesday nights, Thursdays. They had Relief Society on a separate day. I think primary was on a Tuesday. We were
yeah,
basically at the church all week long,
I think
which is
that's
okay if you live in Utah and it's across the street, but ours was 20 miles away.
yeah, 22 miles.
Yep.
I think that's one of the things that wore Grandpa out a little bit, was just seeing that car running back and forth from Sandusky every day.
Yeah, probably
I
wasn't
mean,
too thrilled about it.
for him, a daily trip to Bellevue was a big deal. So
Well, especially
for
when Zion was just up the street.
for us to be traveling back and forth from Sandusky on an almost daily basis was just a lot for them to try to understand and deal with.
Right.
So there is that echo again. So anyway, but yeah, mom was this amazing, consummate mother and homemaker. Susan, our stepmom, was very much the same thing. Both of our grandmothers were amazing, mothers and homemakers, and so I didn't have to really look outside our own home to see amazing examples of what a mother could be and should be. But he just filled in a lot of things for me, and he helped me to understand how much a mission could do to help prepare me in so many ways, but especially prepare me to get married and have a family.
Yeah.
And so it was really through George that, and through these 8 talks, like I've got 8 of these 45-minute talks here that were on
Do you still have
cassette.
the cassette tapes?
I do, yeah. I've got
Nice.
them. I've got them right here.
That's
The
cool.
one is in the player. These are copies of the ones that Dad had. So,
Yeah.
um, yeah, I would sit there. In fact, let me throw it. We want all the details here. So, here's the farmhouse here. Can you see this?
Yep.
And of course, I was in this bedroom right here, which was Dad's old bedroom, and this was your bedroom over here. And of
Yep.
course, you weren't there at this time because you were out at Rick's, but I was right here, and my desk was right up against this wall, and I would sit in that little room and write and read my Book of Mormon and write in my journal, and it was underneath the light of this lamp,
Oh my
which
gosh, I can't believe you still have that.
Grandpa gave me. This was
That's
this
so
was
funny.
this was Grandpa's lamp.
Nice.
So I would sit there with all of that, and I would listen to my George Durant tapes, and eventually I did end up going on a mission, and I got called to Australia, which was just the
Wasn't
coolest
that
thing
where
in the
you
world.
wanted to go?
No, I don't know that I really even knew where I wanted to go. I didn't have a place. I was willing to go wherever I needed to go. I didn't really have a place to go when I got
Well,
this
it suited
call.
you.
When I got this call to Australia, I thought that was like Austria. I
Oh,
thought I was going to Europe. And so, I mean, I had had geography in eighth grade. And so I knew where, some of the major countries were. But I thought when I saw the word Australia that I was going to Austria. I thought, oh, I'm going
mm.
to Europe, I'm going
And
to
that was
learn a
Grandma and
language.
Grandpa Cunningham's favorite place when they went on their like tours around Europe. Austria was their absolute favorite place.
Oh, wow, I didn't know that.
Yep.
So yeah, getting called to Adelaide was really neat. But George had this huge impact on my young life here there that year and the years leading up to my mission. And then what was really amazing was when I walked into the Provo MTC and got directed into the main meeting room there. And this is December of 1986. Who is standing up front as our MTC president? But George D. Durant. George Durant was the MTC president when I showed up there in
That
December of
must have just blown
1986.
you away.
And I did not know that he was the MTC president. So that was pretty amazing to see this guy up there.
Like
And
one
I,
of your heroes, basically.
yeah, for sure. Now, this is kind of the interesting story. So in the years leading up to my mission, I started teaching myself how to play a couple hymns. I never put my time and effort into my musical things like I should have. I was always outside playing sports or working in the barn or whatever. Mom could never get me to practice the violin, the trumpet, and or the piano very much, even though she tried to get me engaged in all those things. But as I was getting kind of coming to life spiritually, there, I taught myself how to. I memorized "Hope of Israel" and about three or four other hymns, and I could play them from memory. I couldn't sit down and read the music, but I taught myself to play those songs, and I could sit down and play them. Now, if I stopped in the middle, I could not just pick up in the middle somewhere. I could start at the beginning, or I could start at the chorus or whatever. But I couldn't just start out in the middle somewhere. I had to start. I had to start somewhere where I knew how to start.
Right.
So I'm sitting there in the halfway back in this big meeting room or whatever, and wouldn't you know it, Hope of Israel, which this is the song that I knew the best and felt the most comfortable with. Hope of Israel is up there on the screen. And George gets up there and is like, hey, is there someone out here who can play this song?
And you're in
And
there with like hundreds of missionaries, right?
I'm just like, I know that there are plenty of LDS kids out here who can play, the piano.
Right.
And I do not need to feel encouraged to go up here and attempt this in front of this audience, right? Well, nobody's volunteering. And so again, he's like, hey, more people have come in now, getting ready to start the meeting, hey, is anybody, can we get a volunteer to come up and, play the piano? We don't have a piano player right now, who can come up and play Hope of Israel? So at this point, the Spirit's like, you can do this. You get up there and play this song. And I'm like, I don't think so, So I wait another minute or so. And finally, I'm just like, okay, I guess,
I guess we're doing this.
I guess I'm supposed to do this, So I go up there, I volunteer, I sit at this. Now I can play this song, but I've never followed a chorister before. I don't
Oh,
know, but I play a little refrain. I guess I played the chorus once. Maybe I didn't even do that. Maybe we just got right into it. I don't know, but I knew that I was supposed to kind of watch the chorister. So we swing into this, and I'm playing away there, and I have this memorized, so I don't have to look at the music. I mean, I didn't even need the music in front of me. And so I'm just looking at the chorister, I'm looking out at the audience, I'm kind of looking over at George. I'm looking at everywhere, but at the music, and people around are just, anybody who's paying attention to me was like, man, this dude is like some amazing, pianist. He doesn't even look at the music.
he's got the whole hymnal memorized.
And so, and so, and I managed. Now there was one point where I felt like I almost lost it. And here's the thing: like if I had lost it somewhere out in the middle, I'm done. I mean,
Right.
like we're gonna start at the course or something here because I don't know how to pick up where I've left off. But I managed to get through all four verses of Hope of Israel without losing my place. And unfortunately, everybody forgot about my amazing piano skills, and that was the last time I had to show them off. But that was my first experience with George. But I popped into his office at some point there and visited with him and talked to him some. And then after my MTC experience was over, I got out to the mission field. And oh no, actually, I did this while I was at the MTC, but I dropped this letter off right before I left. And I just wrote him a letter and told him, how much, I don't remember exactly what I said, but it was something, just to thank him for his
Influence.
stories, influence, and it was just a letter like that. But I didn't sign it. I just left it anonymous because I didn't want him to feel. I mean, he's busy. He doesn't need to have to feel like he needs to write me a letter. I just wanted to thank him and just kind of leave an anonymous letter. Well, I'll be darned if that cotton picker didn't figure out where that letter came from, and this letter showed up in Australia,
How the heck did he know that it was you?
and it's dated the very same day that I left for Australia.
Wow.
So he figured out who left that letter behind, and he sent this letter to me in Australia, and just thanked me for the letter and signed this. And it was just the coolest thing to be down there in Australia and get this letter here. I mean, it didn't show up in Australia, until like 2 weeks later.
Yep.
But yeah, how cool was that? And then at some point around, I want to say maybe 95, 96, I was out in Utah here for some reason, and I actually looked him up in the phone book, and I just walked over to his house, knocked on his door, and sure enough, he was there. It was
Wow.
just right here in Provo somewhere. The thing, and he invited me in, and we visited and chatted for a bit. And the one thing I remember about being in his home there is his living room. His daughters were making this big quilt, and so there's big quilting thing that was taking up pretty much the whole living room. But they were there. The daughters were there working in the kitchen or whatever, and I just came in and sat down and visited with them for 15 or 20 minutes, and that was I think that was the last time I actually. Oh no, that I actually saw George in the Mount Timpanogos Temple one night, and I think maybe we were in a sealing session with him, and he was the sealer. But that was 15 years ago or so. Now I do know that George lives right over here by the MTC, but he's like 94 years old. And one of my customers over there knows him. And I was talking to this customer about, hey, could you get me over to see George? Because I'd love to see him. But I don't know at age 94, is he kind of where dad is at, or how's he doing? I don't really know. So that hasn't happened yet. That's one of the reasons why I was kind of like checking in with his son, Devin, who is one of my Facebook friends. Not that we are friends, we're not really friends, but we were hooked up in Facebook. I was kind of checking in with Devin to see, how is your dad doing?
Right.
I think his son Devin is up there at Rick's. I think he lives up there. I don't know if he's teaching up there or what. I'm sure he's probably retired now too. But Devin was an All-American basketball player here at BYU and still holds, I think, a number of scoring records and whatever over here at BYU.
That's cool.
In fact, this past year, I think one of his scoring records
Was just beaten.
Got beaten by this Debansta kid, or however you pronounce his name. And then Devin went on and played for the Dallas Mavericks, and then he played in Europe. But he was 6'7", and he was a really standout player for Provo High School. Provo High School won the state title that year, and then he was a standout player for BYU. So that's kind of my story there about George Durant, and we are about 25 minutes into this, and I had so much more that I wanted to say about how this all developed. And now I'm trying to think, should I carry on here, or should we just wait? And
you could do it next week.
Yeah, why don't we do that? Why don't we pick up, because I really want to share how, once I got back home from my mission, how this all shaped up for me, and by following George's example and by following his teachings, how this all developed in my life, because it is a pretty amazing story, and it would be a lot of fun to share it. So, and it would
Can
be
I share
really,
something as a sister?
You sure can. Go ahead.
All right. Well, I knew you before and after you served your mission. And
Okay.
while you were on your mission, I had my first son, Christopher. And I remember calling you in Australia to tell you about
Oh,
it from the hospital. I called you from
yeah,
the hospital to
yeah,
tell
I
you
remember
about
that.
having Christopher. And we discussed his middle name because it's Cars, which is kind of a weird name. And I said it's like Johnny Carson without the N. So I think like it wasn't a great connection that we had, but at least I got to talk to you.
Yeah.
But the man that stepped off the airplane into the airport because I was there was a completely different man that left. And I could just tell that you carried the spirit with you. You had grown up. You you were not so easy to anger as you were before you left. And it was just amazing to me what a mission had done for you. So, as a sister, that's something I noticed.
Well, I appreciate that. I don't know that I was even much of a man when I left, so but very much a boy when I left. But anyway, um, yeah, it was an amazing 2 years down there, and it did change your perspective about a lot of things for sure. And I could have never been ready to get married and had a family without that experience.
Yeah,
So
if you hadn't gone. Yep.
I want to talk more about some of the people we were talking about Tuesday night. Um, Matt Canode and
Sure.
Heather Sprague and some of those others. So, but let's not mix that in with this tonight.
Our
Let's save
Bellevue
that.
friends.
Yeah,
But we
let's save.
actually came from a really, really good town when you think about it. So many good people, and there's still a lot of good people in Bellevue. So,
I was looking through this yearbook here, and I was looking at all these kids, and yeah, I totally agree. Just really, really, really good kids, and so many good families, so many good Catholic families
so
there
many
in
Catholic
Bellevue.
families, and they were just, they're
Big,
very religious. They just are. They're just really good people.
big.
Now, I was telling someone the other night how when we were in high school, my Catholic friends would go to church on Saturday night. They'd have mass on Saturday night so that they could stay out and party and wouldn't have to get up on Sunday morning.
Okay.
So there was that little bit, but
Right. Yeah. Well,
so
it's a different approach,
yeah,
um, but yeah, really amazing Catholic families. I mean, you think about the Hayes and the Shanes, and I mean we could go down the list there, but the Greens.
my friend Kathy
Um,
Deppen, her family's Catholic.
yeah, there was just so many big Catholic families there in Bellevue, and I don't think it's anywhere near like that way today as far as all the big families that used to be there. But it was special times there during the '80s, for sure,
We were
and
blessed,
we were blessed to be a part of it, even though we were somewhat different and not a part of it in some ways, but very much a part of it in other ways. So,
right?
all right, well, hey, so we will pick this up again. I don't know exactly how soon, but we'll get that figured out. We'll pick this up again and pick up these stories again, and thanks for jumping in here and sharing this, and we'll catch y'all next time.
Yeah, I really enjoyed your friend last night that was on too. He was great.
Oh, Daryl,
Daryl?
Daryl,
Yeah. He was
right?
really, really humble. You could tell what a good guy he is. So,
Yeah, yeah, he really is, and he went through a lot. I mean, literally, this stuff literally has saved his life,
yeah,
and it has totally changed and transformed mine. So I feel so blessed by it all. I feel really pathetic in my ability to really share it effectively. I feel like I'm hardly the messenger that the message deserves, but
right.
but I'm gonna keep doing my best. So,
All
all right,
right.
I'm gonna click off here. We can stay on for a minute.